Hello, welcome everyone. We're happy you've been able to join us for this online session, Dual and Concurrent Enrollment in History, Strengthening Programs and Learning, which is part of the AHA Online Teaching Forum this year. And we're looking forward to a productive discussion, some presentations and discussion about strategies to engage, motivate, and challenge students in an online environment. And we have a lot of diverse expertise here on our panel, but I'll just say a few things about the logistics before we start. All of the participants are muted. If you run into any technical issues, please use the chat box and an AHA staff member, Megan Connor, will help you resolve the issue to the best of your ability. To submit questions to presenters, please use the Q&A function. So there's the chat function and the Q&A function. The chat function goes to a staff member. The Q&A will all be able, the panelists and I will all be able to see. And at the end of the presentations, we'll have direct discussion of individual questions. We hope to address all of them, but we also want to make sure we are mindful of people's time. And finally, a quick reminder, the webinar will be recorded. It is being recorded, and we will share the recording after the live session. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists, and they will give us a little bit more background about their roles in relation to dual and concurrent enrollment. So first up is Elaine Kerry.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elaine Kerry, as Julia mentioned, and I'm Dean of the College of Humanities, Education, and Social Sciences at Purdue University Northwest. And I have been enamored with a concurrent enrollment now for a number of years. I don't want to say how long. And I've actually seen really great models and models that maybe aren't so great. And so I'm actually going to focus on the model that's at the institution where I currently work, which is a little bit smaller scale and is NACEP accredited. So at PNW, there are 26 partnerships, and those cover all disciplines that you would find in general education. Participating in the program are 72 high school teachers. All of them either have master's degrees or have 18 credit hours in advanced study in that particular discipline, or are conditionally teaching within the program because they are pursuing additional credit hours or a master's degree. As I mentioned, the NACEP accreditation is really about building those partnerships. So it focuses on partnerships, curriculum development, faculty, students, assessment, and ongoing program evaluation. So here at PNW, that is overseen by a coordinator, and the coordinator actually reports to the director of the School of Education, who has a lot of work and familiarity with concurrent enrollment. Now, the history department obviously fits in with that. And so they have really made an effort to reach out to their partner schools through a number of things. One is obviously they have a CEP coordinator or a concurrent enrollment coordinator who meets regularly. They also participate in big history projects, so they bring a lot of the teachers to work on that. Because there's a master's program, there's a lot of outreach to teachers through that particular program. And as I mentioned, even training in some aspects in the big history project. So there's a lot of outreach. Recently, because of COVID, we know that some of that has become more difficult. So in the history department, where, you know, a very collegial department, very inclusive of their adjuncts, inclusive of their visiting faculty, of lecturers, as well as concurrent enrollment teachers. So with COVID, that meant really kind of changing how you work. And so a couple things. One is in the midst of COVID, because that wasn't enough to deal with, we used a new learning management system too. So that just meant that teachers who were also trying to transition their classes wouldn't have time to build those shells. So in fact, concurrent enrollment in here, they actively participate in helping building those shells, doing outreach. Our Center for Teaching for Faculty Development offered classes to help people with the new learning management system. Obviously, site visits are completely out of the question because some of our partner schools are partially face-to-face, some are completely online, some have hybrid approaches just like we do. So what instead, we are really maintaining our compliance by using tools such as this one, such as Zoom. And so we're kind of in the midst of all of this and all of these changes, but I think the model and being an accredited program and wanting to maintain that accreditation with NACEP has been really important of having guidelines of what to do and how to respond. So it is constantly evolving and changing at this point because of the virus. But the history department has also been active with concurrent enrollment in a camp that took place this summer, really to kind of close that gap between when schools shut down and went to online learning. Some had more difficulty doing that than others. So the history department participated with the office to actually run this camp, which was really to close that gap in skills. So really creative things have come out of what is going on, but there continue to be some challenges just because of those different approaches. So I think my colleagues will be providing more of that information as we go forward of their own experiences. And I'm open to any questions when we get to the question and answer time. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. And next, we're going to hear from Bruce Bardos.
Hi, my name is Bruce Bardos. I've been teaching in Middletown, Connecticut, going on 36 years. I've been an instructor in the University of Connecticut Early College Experience, going on 26 years. I teach Western Civilization, which is designated at UConn as History 1300 and History 1400. I truly believe that the University of Connecticut ECE program is something special. Students can earn UConn credits. Those credits are also taken at approximately 90% of colleges and universities across the nation. Many high schools in the state of Connecticut do the ECE program. Last marking period in my school, we went to all virtual for the last marking period. We're going on a hybrid model this year, but you know, we haven't had many details on it yet, so there's not that much I can report out on it. The class that I teach is not a class that is both an AP and a UConn class. It can only be taken as a year-long high school course and a 2-semester UConn course. This means students will earn a total of 6 credits. This makes the course a smart choice for college-bound students. In the class, high school students will be exposed to the type of academic rigor that is required at the university level. They will hear lectures, they will write persuasive essays, they will have a textbook, they will read full-length history books, they will read and discuss primary sources, Socratic seminars, and so on and so forth. It's a survey course that follows a chronological study of Western civilization in History 1300. The course goes from the ancient world through medieval times. In History 1400, it goes from the Renaissance to modern times. Another thing that is excellent about the high school course is that UConn will waive the registration fee for students of low income. This is important for many of our students at Middletown High School. It makes the course more inclusive. I have been working with guidance to encourage lower income students to enroll. One terrific change at UConn is lower income Connecticut residents admitted to UConn as undergraduates will receive free tuition starting with the fall 2020 entering class. For a family in Connecticut with a household income of $50,000 or below annually, their child will be able to come to UConn tuition free under this plan. So for lower income students, even if they do not go to UConn, if they take the course for free at the high school, they will probably be able to use the credit somewhere else. This is a fantastic incentive. One goal of mine is to have the Western Civilization class reflect the student body that we have at Middletown High. We have a very diverse group of students, and I want the class to reflect that diversity. Fortunately, we have a very good guidance department at my school, and they share this goal. They are well aware of the benefit of the class. All in all, I strongly believe that courses like the one I teach, dual enrollment courses, are a wonderful opportunity for students. In these classes, students are challenged by college level work. They earn credits for college. They go to college more prepared. They save money, and they have a head start on the credits they need for graduation. As I said, I have been teaching this course going on 26 years, and for all these reasons that I have mentioned and more, I'm still excited about teaching the course. If you have any other questions, I'd be glad to answer them later. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we'll hear from Mark Peters.
Hi, I'm Mark Peters. I teach at Chappaqua Valley High School, also in Connecticut. And like Bruce, I've been part of the UConn Early College Experience program for myself about 20 years. I've been a teacher for about 34 years. And really, Bruce said almost everything that needs to be said and said it well. The UConn ECE program is probably the very best professional experience that I've had, certainly one of them, if not the best over the years. It's a wonderful opportunity for the kids, and the reason that to sort of build on what Bruce said, here at Chappaqua, they spend a lot of time talking to us about trying to move kids from compliant to engaged learners. That's a very popular phrase, and the reality, though, is high school is built to encourage compliance. It's not really built to encourage engaged learners, and a really hard, honest conversation about the structures of high school makes that pretty clear. But the UConn program really does demand engaged learners. And as Bruce said, the kids are reading and writing on a fairly high level. The documents, the primary source documents we read are unusual, not the sort of thing that kids in high school are normally exposed to. And the writing is analytical, argumentative, not just summative. We're not looking for them to simply repeat information. We're looking for them to build an argument. And the arguments are about things like motivation and point of view and probability. And the kids enjoy that. The program really rewards kids who have a feeling that they think college might be for them, and they want to find out if that's the case. My program, unlike Bruce's, is at least for one of the courses, it also parallels the AP European History program. The nice thing about UConn is you get the credit without the terrifying and, let's be honest, kind of public test at the end. In our district, scores they're looked at very closely by a lot of people, and that scares kids and parents away who want to have some sort of an experience. They want to try to up their game, but they're not really interested in the stress that comes with that AP test. So UConn is a wonderful alternative, and as Bruce may or may not have mentioned, the statistics on UConn's application, or UConn's not application, the credits being accepted at other schools are considerably higher than the AP scores. Universities recognize that a concurrent program like the one Bruce and I are in are more worthy of reward credit-wise than simply an AP score. So it's nice to be able to offer the kids something that is really a better program, to be perfectly blunt. The other great part of this program, this UConn ECE program, is the PD they offer us. I've been going up to UConn twice a year for the last 20 years, and they put on the best in-depth historical seminars for us. We get to work with all different sorts of professors, obviously many from UConn, but they bring people in from quite a few different places. And we get to see what historians are doing, really current event kind of research, because the reality is in the high school, we're using textbooks that are not really cutting edge historiography. But getting to go up to UConn is a wonderful experience. And the UConn professors will come out to us. I had a professor come out last year, or 2 years ago, and sit into the class of my students and discuss documents with them. And they were thrilled. They thought it was just the coolest thing that this guy would come out, and we are in the back and beyond out here, truly out in the woods. And that a professor from UConn would drive many hours to sit with 7 kids is pretty neat. And finally, the last thing, I'm also the site representative, which means I'm the guy who helps people fill out paperwork, both prospective teachers and students who want to do the program. And I have to say, the very best people get involved with these programs. These programs really don't offer any additional pay, and they are extra work. And yet, when you look at the people who do them, they are really devoted to this. So here at Chapag, which is a very small school, we have 2 math teachers, an economics teacher, 2 literature teachers, and a couple of teachers in our ag program who all are part of this program. And, you know, we're a school of 350 kids. We're a very small school, but we have almost 75 kids enrolled in these programs, and the teachers who do this are devoted. They're just really the best of the best. So that's my overview, and I'll be happy to answer questions too.
Thank you. Maybe I think I'm next. So my name is, oh, Julia, did you want to step in?
Yeah, I was just going to say Janine Giordano Drake is next. Sorry, my buttons were a little slow.
No problem. So my name is Janine Giordano Drake. I have a joint appointment between the Advanced College Project and the History Department at Indiana University. So I both report to the History Department and I am a historian, and to our unit of dual enrollment overall at IU. At Indiana University, we have, I think, 22 or 23 different dual enrollment subjects. And so we have something like 50,000 students overall who are in our dual enrollment programs. I'm the liaison for history, and the history, dual enrollment students in history, we have about, I think, several thousand. We have about 90 or 100 teachers, and we have several thousand students enrolled in our program right now. So my job here at IU is to do all of the work of a liaison. So that involves site visits, and all year, especially during the fall, I do site visits to a large fraction of these schools. The schools that are too far to get to easily, I often do Zoom visits. So I've been doing virtual visits before the pandemic started. And so I'll do virtual visits, I'll do in-person visits. During the pandemic last spring, I was able to do sort of visits to teachers' online platforms. So sometimes I would do a visit to a discussion board. I would do visits to, I would have conversations with students, not with students, conversations with teachers over the phone, and then look at their discussion board and talk about how things were going. So I do site visits. I do professional development, which means in the summer, I train teachers, the new incoming class of teachers. And during the school year, I organize professional development days. And as Mark said, they can be really fun because we do discussions on the most recent research. But we also do discussions on the most recent teaching strategies, and we talk about the state of the history department and the state of the history major, and we talk about recruiting for the history major. Not that that's the most important thing, but we talk about what does it mean to major in history right now, as opposed to at other moments in time, because we're a diverse group of teachers. And so our professional development, for example, this year is going to focus on writing, and I'm going to recruit some folks who are in our writing center, our writing tutorial services, and talk about giving meaningful feedback on writing. In the past, we've done work on different types of assessment, because I want, in our program, it's not just important to let our teachers be involved in newest discussions on history, but also on the changes that have been taking place in the college world in terms of what types of papers and which types of assignments we're giving students. I've been doing a lot of work, especially recently, on teaching teachers to be prepared to prepare their students to do research assignments in college. And that's one of those college readiness skills. It's one of those skills that help students have success in college. So that's an important part of our 100 level dual enrollment course. I also represent the high school teachers to the history department. So I'm on the undergraduate curriculum committee in our history department, and I sort of represent this connection between the high schools and the state and the history department. And I do all sorts of work in building that bridge, and most literally by connecting us to high schools across the state, but also more generally in knowing what are people getting out of social studies, and how can we build on the interests that high school students are developing already when they're in high school. Also, part of my job is to have public-facing work. So I have been working in the state, well, with folks in the state superintendent, in working on standards in the state of Indiana, for example, the U.S. history standards. And more generally, as I've said, with writing tutorial services and helping connect high school students with meaningful resources, both research and in other areas like writing. Of the university. So more and lastly, I would say, I also teach in our pipeline program. the ACP program at IU has a really cool program where we will provide high school teachers the opportunity to get their 18 credits and/or their master's degree if they need a master's degree in order to be proficient and working effectively through our NASIP certification. And so I also teach in that program. And it's really fun to have the opportunity to work with these high school teachers as they're doing their graduate work, as well as observe them, as well as see them at PD days, and develop a holistic relationship that goes beyond just the ordinary liaison work that I would do in site visits.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, Trini, you're up.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, my connection is not very good, so I'll ask you to introduce yourself altogether.
Okay. Hi, my name is Trinidad Gonzales, Trini Gonzales. I'm a history and Mexican American studies instructor at South Texas College in McAllen, Texas. McAllen, Texas is located on the border between Texas and Mexico on the southern tip. We've recently obviously been in the news a lot, either as it is related to immigration policy, more recently COVID, and a significant number of people who passed away as a result of the COVID pandemic. In fact, we've just gone over 1,000 people have died in the last 3 or 4 months of this year. Many of our students, faculty, and others that we know in the community. Just some background on South Texas College's program. We are NASIP accredited. We just became NASIP accredited this year. We're the first in the state of Texas to have that accreditation. Give you an idea of numbers, we have 21 school districts in the 2 counties of Hidalgo and Stark County, which is our taxing district for the community college, and 70 high schools. And then we have, besides dual enrollment, where students can do 6 hours of dual credit per semester. We also have early college high schools, which is the first 2 years, 9th and 10th grade is usually reserved for high school preparation or study. And then their junior, senior year, they actually take on full loads of college with the intention of graduating with an associate's degree at the end of their early college high school experience, 60 hours. Also, we have academies. We have 12 academies. Academies are programs where the students actually come on campus. They're not separated into a separate high school the way the early college high school is. And they have 12 degrees there from pre-med, education, criminal justice, and so on and so forth. And those students come as cohorts. It's limited to 25, 30 students per year. Apply, submit letters, then they go through the review process to see if they're accepted into the academy. As a result, we have students graduating with 20-some plus hours of high school that in Texas is transferable to any other state institution, well as 1,000 some graduates per year with associate's degrees. So by the time they graduate high school, they have an associate's degree and they can then complete their 4-year degree 2 years later. And the idea is then they go on to their advanced degrees as well. And so we have a very large program. To give you the idea of numbers, it's 13,000 to 14,000 students enrolled in dual credit per year. So it's a very large program in the nation itself. Certainly in Texas, it is itself. So those are the numbers of the school that I work at. I'm supposed to turn on my timer, sorry. And so what I do as an assistant chair for dual enrollment is to work with the 30 faculty that teach history. And that entails, besides the bureaucratic sort of things, they gotta, turn in their rosters, they gotta turn in their grades, and a lot of this is automated now, but we gotta make sure they get it done. Make sure the syllabi match up with ours so that there's no problems there. And that we're doing everything that meets SACS's concerns. SACS, the Association of Colleges, is our accrediting body. Also deal with issues they have with the high schools. And so one of the tensions between somebody who teaches dual enrollment that's a college faculty, and I teach dual enrollment every semester. I cannot do that, but I choose to sign up for dual enrollment classes to teach, versus somebody who's a high school employee that teaches dual enrollment for us, is while they go through the same interview process and the same application process to acquire that job to teach for us, even though they're not being paid by us, they have to submit their transcripts, they have to go through an interview process, a teaching demonstration. They have to deal with principals. And principals will put a lot of pressure on them to try to inflate grades. And so, of course, they come to us with those concerns. Now, we can push back on the principals, but the faculty member is stuck between the person who is actually their employer versus, what we're telling them that they need to do. And so the way we address that then is two ways. We now have a principals agreement that all principals have to sign. And we tell the principals if they engage in this behavior, their dual credit program will be eliminated. And that tends to put the fear of God in them. And then it releases the burden on the faculty member as well. And then the other thing we do is we evaluate faculty every year. I did all of them last year. Sometimes it's a group of us that'll go into the classroom and evaluate the high school faculty. Just the same method and forms that we get evaluated on campus as well. So it's not a different evaluation system. It's the same. And to ensure then that we're meeting the college standards of rigor and content for what we want them to be taught and what meets the state of Texas's course outcome for those classes. So that being said, I think there's another tension that that's a problem right now across the academy. It's not just related to dual enrollment, but it's related to history education itself. And that is, what is higher education versus what is considered secondary education? And I think that the scholarship of teaching and learning and history has upended that conversation, right? In general, many people think higher education history is simply teaching content that might be the latest sort of scholarship that's come out there. But what we know now is that that's not really teaching. That's just presenting a lecture on new information. That doesn't necessarily lead to the learning of history that we now understand occurs through the result of pedagogical studies that have gone on the last 20 years. And so I think that scholarship of teaching of history is going to start to upend our perceptions in the academy between Research 1 and high school teachers. In fact, I think high school teachers are in many ways better prepared to teach history than Research 1 faculty. And that's a continuous conversation we're having right now. So I'd like to have that conversation. But to get back to COVID-1 and online teaching, all our faculty at the high schools had to be, in fact, all the faculty across STC had to be fully certified to teach online by August 1st. In order to retain their contracts. And we use Quality Matters, which is an organization that looks at how online teaching is done, that is effective and easy for students to navigate and learn as our standard. And so I'm willing to take questions on how we address COVID and online teaching, as well as maybe the more provocative questions around upending the elitism with the academy when it comes to understanding how we teach.
All right, well, thank you all very much for your presentations. We're now going to move into the Q&A section of the webinar. And I will read the questions as we have them. We have a couple already. And if panelists, I will ask them, and if you have a, we'll sort of balance who wants to speak first, who wants to respond, that kind of thing. So I will go more or less in order. I would like to ask one that's a little bit narrower first, and that is, what are the specific challenges to teaching at the college level in terms of rigor while still providing scaffolding for students who have limited English proficiency? So, Trini, is this one you can address?
Yeah. So we're basically looking at English language learners in higher education. I think first, it depends what language they speak. So they speak Spanish, and for instance, I'm familiar with Spanish. Understanding the grammar and the way Spanish is written, for instance, and then translating how somebody who's trying to write English from Spanish are different. So, one of the things that figured out a long time ago is that, you know, anybody knows Spanish, is Spanish sentences could be forever, right? Super long. Whereas English sentences could be very short. And so what I told students, look, if you want to write out Spanish, write out Spanish, but every time you have to put a comma or semicolon or some sort of grammatical break within a sentence, make that a standalone sentence for English. And make sure you have a subject, verb, object, right, to keep it active voice as much as possible. And what I then do is I try to work with them depending on what writing levels they have, right? So you have people who speak Spanish and English language learners that are very educated, come with degrees from Mexico, but those degrees are not recognized in the United States or other parts of Latin America. And then some students who are working class, whose primary language is Spanish, which means then you also have to deal with the literacy issues at that level. So there's a couple of things you have to figure out in assessing the students' language skills abilities. Neither of which are signs of intelligence, by the way. Right? You know, intelligence is a process, it's not an innate thing we have in us. And so getting them to also understand that. And I've been much more forthright and explain to students that intelligence is a process of learning. It's not where you're at right now, right? It's just like working out or being physically fit. So I do that. And then also then make sure they go to the tutoring centers and other resources you might have on campus to help them with their translating and writing, and then evaluating them as a process as opposed to an end product, and then helping them move forward and get better through that method.
Are there other panelists who would like to address that question?
Yeah, I have had a number of ELL students in my class, and what the method has always been, I've worked very closely with the ELL teacher. Now, you know, these students, they may not get an A in the class, but, you know, if they work hard, they do just fine, and it's very good college experience for them. So, I mean, if you work in conjunction with the ELL teacher, it can be a very beneficial, you know, kind of thing for the ELL student.
I don't have a lot of ELL students, but I do have a number of special ed students who, again, like all the other kids in the school, are interested in trying to step up their game, and the UConn course is appealing to them because, again, our district says if you do the UConn program, you don't have to take the generally mandated AP exam. So this is a chance for kids who want to try their hand at something more sophisticated. And as Trini said earlier, history isn't about trying to remember all the facts, it's about analytic reasoning. So Bruce and I are really lucky that UConn gives us a lot of latitude about how we grade and what content is covered. So it's been a very good experience for most of my special ed kids to see that they can work at a high analytic level, maybe not as fast as other kids, but they can do it. And it's been really pretty neat to see over the years how many of them come in very tentatively, and by the end of the course they recognize they can do this kind of work with some adaptations and some supports. But it's been my experience to work with special ed kids more than ELL kids.
I would just like to add, you know, piggybacking on what Bruce and Trini mentioned, is using the resources that are available, so ELL, but also the writing centers at the university, because many of the writing center faculty and as well as the students are working together and have been over the years really accelerating how to work with students who are English language learners. And I think it's a great resource. So that's one of the things as a teacher working within in teaching in concurrent enrollment, that's a significant part of the partnership. And if you have English language learners, you should be asking that question and insisting upon that support from the university, because they provide it to their students, and the concurrent enrollment students are their students also.
Janine, did you want to respond to that as well? Sorry, I think I caught Janine in a bad minute here. You're muted here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I would just, there's not really that much to add. One of the things that perhaps is the most obvious point is just that very often, not always, but very often, high school teachers actually have twice as many contact hours as college professors. And I don't really like that this is changing sometimes, that, sometimes, schools have been moving more to trimester systems or to even shorter systems where they actually don't have twice as many contact hours. But in the ideal sense, high school teachers actually have so many more contact hours that they really can and should go slower, work through things more slowly, and therefore really meet students where they are in working through the language issues involved in all these primary sources in a way that a college professor might not really have that luxury to do, and also wouldn't have the student faculty ratio to really make that possible either. And I think in that way, as Trini said something about how it's really an ideal situation to be in a dual enrollment environment as opposed to just being a very large lecture hall. And I think that really can be true for students who can benefit from working through the same material a little bit slower and with a lot more faculty involvement.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to another question here. A question about the relationship between the secondary school district, and it says degree granting institution, but I think what is intended is the credit granting institution, the institution of higher education, who's granting credit for the concurrent or dual enrollment courses. How important is that relationship in providing access to academic journals, primary sources, and encouraging participation in their professional association? And how important is that for the success of the dual enrollment program?
I'll answer that if to start. In the state of Indiana, we do not put pressure on our high schools to have subscriptions to any college level, journals or anything. All of the high schools that are involved in our program have access to the journals that have been provided for the regional campus that they're connected with, and therefore they have access to those portals, and they basically have a username. They're as a student. I think they're just not a degree seeking student. So they use the university resources, and the high school does not need to provide those. In our particular program, part of my job is to actually provide primary sources, to provide resources for high school teachers. Not that they have to use all of those, but to make them available for high school teachers who need stuff, who want to just have simple primary sources to discuss in the classroom, as well as secondary sources. And therefore, this really is developed with an equity-minded ideal in mind. It's developed with a sense of some high schools already have their own access to things, but we do not require that because we really do want a wider variety of students to take our dual enrollment course than they would would be allowed to come into IU. A small fraction of the students in the state of Indiana, gain entry into IU Bloomington, but a much larger fraction of students can gain entry into IU Bloomington through our dual enrollment program. So it's an opportunity to give more students access to those university resources than would have been allowed through our ordinary admission process.
Thank you.
And Janine's comment is really important because the idea about the resources and the integration of concurrent enrollment programs into the university is really important. And that is something that, as I mentioned, I talked about two separate models of seeing this. And so, in one model that I was working in, they did not have access. And this was an ongoing issue for the teachers who were providing and were part of the department teaching in their local high schools. So this is a question of advocacy also for department chairs of history departments that are not providing this, and that you should advocate for the access. Now, frequently what you'll do is you will get pushback regarding in certain institutions about the cost of the subscription and the number of users. But if the university is reporting concurrent enrollment students as part of their student enrollment, then they should also be doing that for those library subscriptions. And so this might take a little bit of investigative work, but it's in the interest of your students to do so as maybe a department chair, and as a high school teacher, if you're listening, to maybe nudge the department chair to do that, or your coordinator who's coming on campus and say, hey, are you guys reporting this data? So why aren't we kind of having access to these databases. So there's the revolutionary part.
I just want to chime in real quick and agree with what was been said earlier about the importance of equal access to all resources that the higher education institution has for faculty and for students. And that goes for particularly for students, everything from the tutoring center, but to, counseling. Like I said, we've had a lot of people pass away. In fact, one of the first messages I gave my students on Monday was to send my condolences for many of them that I know have had people they've had, their family or friends that have passed away as a result. And so counseling services are important. And for the college faculty, it's all about the training and access to everything that I would have access to. There should not be a distinction just simply because they're a high school employee. And in fact, they have a college ID number that allows them to access everything as well. So they got the same ID that I have.
Thank you. And we have 2 more questions already, and participants feel free to add to this list as the questions occur to you. But we're going to take one next, which is a little bit about the range of options available to students for earning college credit before college. So dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment, advanced placement courses, quite a range of options. Asking from an equity-minded perspective, do you ever sense that first-generation college students and their families have a difficult time sorting out the purposes, advantages, and costs of these programs?
Yeah, this is a real challenge. And as the site representative, I hear this all the time because in our district, AP is considered the gold standard. Not by people who really know what they're talking about, but UConn's ECE program is much more valuable for the kids in terms of the credits and the acceptance of the credits. But they only really hear about it from me when they come into the room and find out this class is also this program. And many parent conference I've had where parents said, oh, I didn't know that was available, even though we send emails and we reach out. One of the biggest problems that we have in my school district is making parents aware that there is a college credit program that isn't the AP program, and kids have a choice, and that's always a competition because AP is a marketing machine and everybody's heard of them, and they're not always the best choice. And I feel bad when the UConn deadline has closed and a parent simply didn't understand that because their kid didn't bring the message home and they didn't look at their emails. But this is a real problem, getting the word out there that there is something not only comparable, but really better than AP.
Yeah, I'd just like to kind of piggyback on what Mark said a little bit. I think this is where you need kind of the guidance department to step in. And, the guidance department should be able to report to students what is best for them. Especially, students, of diversity, students of low income, this is something, this is a opportunity to really provide them with credits and college experience without that pressure that Mark has referred to in the past of that test hanging over their head. And this is, I think one of the benefits of this type of dual enrollment course. So yeah, I concur completely.
I think, one of the things we're talking about here is what is the role of a history instructor in this case because of our discipline, but an instructor in general, to help facilitate the wraparound of students and families and wrapping them around with the services they need to make them successful, particularly first generation, lower income communities that we're trying to serve, right? So thinking of yourself simply only as an instructor and I'm only supposed to be in the classroom and I'm supposed to give assignments and tests and lecture and that's my job and I'll move away from, I don't have to do anything else. I think is an outdated understanding of what your role as an educator is in our society today, particularly if you believe in rising or raising up those communities that need help from us. So I think we had to be educated, not just on disciplinary content, but we have to be educated in pedagogy in a better way than we were trained in our PhD programs. And we also have to be trained much better in understanding the ways institutions of education, whether K-12 or higher ed, should provide these supportive services for students, families, and communities that we don't always talk about or think about as history faculty.
Thank you. Was there anyone else who wanted to address that question, or should I?
I'll add one thing. Our ACP program does an annual, or at least we did pre-COVID, meeting with high school counselors and principals, where we talk about what dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment is, and what advantages it has, and not necessarily just to compare it to AP, because we try not to do that, but just to say what it does. And to me, one of the biggest advantages of being enrolled in a dual enrollment situation is college readiness. I talk about how students, when students get to college, we don't just want them to have credits that, you know, make them able to graduate faster and therefore save money. We want them to really thrive. And when you have the opportunity to be enrolled in a dual enrollment situation, taking college courses in high school, you have the opportunity to learn not only to gain confidence in doing college work, but to learn some of the essential skills of navigating a university in a small school environment, in an environment, well, not necessarily small school, but in an environment where you have a student faculty ratio that is much smaller very often than a large university. And that's, to me, that's a really important thing to get out to the community, to let students and parents know that dual enrollment is really about doing college in a way that makes, on terms that are more comfortable for a high school student than going suddenly from a high school environment directly to a very large institution where they're very small in comparison.
Thank you. Okay, so we will take, we have 2 more questions. Oh, here comes some more. Okay, very good. Let me go first to, is there a standalone program to learn online pedagogy? And I know I'd like us to discuss this. I know Trini mentioned Quality Matters. It's qualitymatters.org is the URL, and they have a certification for online teaching. I would also like to interject that the AHA, this webinar, for example, is part of a series of programs we're doing called the AHA Online Teaching Forum. So throughout the year, through next June, we will be offering programs like this, which some of them are a little, you know, all of the topics are different. The approaches differ as well. If you're looking for sort of more content-based things, pedagogical approaches, or something like this, which kind of brings together people who are within the field in different areas and comparing strategies and thinking about what it means to teach history in that environment. We're doing a range of things. So I encourage you to continue looking at your AHA emails and explore the AHA calendar on the website. There's also some things about online teaching on the AHA's Perspectives Daily blog. Some of them ran back, I think, in March or April. There was a whole series about teaching history online. And there is a lot of follow-up material. There is a big set of resources that just came out, I think, last Thursday, for digital resources for teaching history online. So the AHA is offering a lot. It's not a standalone program. So, you know, it is what it is. But I encourage you guys to continue to use the AHA as a resource for this. We will be building and offering more and more throughout the year. So there's that. Are there other programs, standalone programs that panelists you're familiar with?
So along with the AHA, the National Council for Social Studies has also been doing some amazing outreach and work on teaching online, digital history, digital humanities, digital social studies. The other thing is any institution where, you know, that is your partner institution, university, there is an Office of Instructional Technology usually, and they will also offer certifications and training as well, or sometimes it could be, you know, jointly held, or it's also held under the Center for Teaching and Learning or the Center for Faculty Development. So many institutions offer their own internal, And usually that is run by a faculty member or a group of faculty members who are experts in these fields. So it's something to look into and to ask questions about, as well as looking at things that are offered, say, by the AHA and by the National Council for Social Studies.
Just at STC, we actually have an assistant chair for distance education that specifically looks at the resources we have available at STC on our Blackboard platform. That's the learning management system we use. And I guess we're kind of lucky because it's a very robust division. There's their own dean for distance education in our school, and they provide us with a lot of neat little resources. And we also get into the sort of discussions of pedagogy of online teaching as well, which is very distinctly different from, you know, if you're in the classroom and things like that. But I'll echo what Elaine said, you know, try to find out what the resources are at your colleges. And unfortunately, it's going to vary from college or university to university on how well they approach distance education.
Yeah, and to complement all that work on pedagogy and online teaching, I know I and several of my colleagues have been donating our courses to the Canvas Commons and making available. I know for myself, I basically scanned tons of primary sources for high school teachers, and I've put that into the Canvas Commons so that anyone honestly can use those in this COVID moment.
Okay, thank you. We have more questions, so we will continue to take them. I'll go in order here for the two that we have right now. Do you think there is a downside, a detriment in taking AP or dual credit history in terms of covering the material twice, once in high school and again in college? So is it better for students to be exposed to these things in two separate chunks? The first one in high school and the second time in college?
Actually, I don't know that many of our kids take history in college. I think for a lot of them, they see it as an efficient way to get those requirements over with. I know my own son did this at the town where I live in. He took a lot of UConn history courses through high school, so that then when he went to college, he focused on math and science. So I don't know that there's a whole lot of repeating of the subject. I think if you're going to go on and study history and you've got your freshman year courses taken care of, then most of the kids would go on and study much more in depth at a higher level. As Bruce said early on, we tend to offer a survey course, and that's those are required only of some kids, and if they fulfill the requirements, then they don't have to take it again.
Yeah, I just like to say that as an educator, I'm very concerned that we need to make a very important kind of argument for history as an academic subject. I think the history knowledge is going down among the general public, and I think this is a problem. And I think in the high school level, there's less emphasis put on the importance of history. And I think this is something that, you know, universities, colleges, and high schools need to work together in a united front to kind of make sure that this trend doesn't continue. Because I think a knowledge of history is essential for citizenship. So that's something I've been concerned about, you know, as an educator for a while.
Thank you. We have another follow-up question to the earlier question about working at two different levels and the policies that might be different in a high school versus a college or university. At the university level, many of us are prohibited from dealing with calls or emails from students' parents. But at the high school level, parents' access and complaints to teachers remain quite different. How do your instructors handle this issue? Or is this just part of working at two institutional levels?
I hear a lot about this because as the site representative, parents contact me at the high school because UConn won't talk to them. Unless the kids waive their rights, the universities won't talk to them, which is something that parents figure out when their kids go to university, but when especially if it's the first group of kids to go through schools, that's part of the learning curve that parents have to go through. So, you know, I try to patiently explain that the UConn's not going to talk to them. This is usually a problem with things like registering and enrolling in the courses, which is all done online. The University of Connecticut asks our high school kids to behave like college students and use the online registration system, which they have to do, they being the kids, on their own. Adults can't do it for them. I can sit next to them and say, push this button, but for the most part, they have to figure it out. And when the kids wait to the last minute and it doesn't work, they turn to mom and dad, who then expect that they're going to get, you know, an instant callback from UConn, and that's not how it works. So it does produce some frustration, and you know, I've had parents drive up here with $400 checks made out to me that they think is going to get them into the UConn program. And it's a little funny because I want to say, no, please leave it in, you know, cash form in a paper bag out in a field. But then I say, no, seriously, you cannot give me the money. This all has to be handled online. Your child is a University of Connecticut student, and I can't intervene until your child waives their rights. And a lot of the kids don't want to do that, which is kind of interesting because their parents are flipping out, but the kid hasn't checked the box that says, I will allow my parent to speak for me. And so it's a source of tension.
I think what's important is to figure out what your institution's FERPA rules and policies are. I know it's supposed to be uniform across the country, but some institutions of higher ed look at FERPA and they interpret it so that the student is on the high school campus, and therefore the parent has the right to know what's going on at the college level instruction. If it's a high school teacher, right? If it's a college instructor teaching at the high school, then what they usually do, at least at our school, is they refer the information to the counselor, and then the counselor can translate that information to the parent. But really it comes down to knowing your own institution's FERPA interpretations related to how they interact with parents.
Yeah, I agree. And as someone who worked at one institution in dual enrollment and then went to another one, I've learned, yes, that different institutions interpret FERPA differently. And it spun my mind at first, but that is just the way it works. The only thing I would add is that I imagine this is probably true overall at dual enrollment in the dual enrollment world. But I know in our program, a student can have a different high school grade than the college grade. And so their college grade has to be very carefully, it has to be consistent with the rubric that we've set out together. It has to have the assessment criteria is really closely, it needs to be exactly the same across all high schools. So despite the fact that not all high schools need to actually cover the exact same material or the exact same subjects or have the same literal paper assignments, they do have to have the same assessment criteria in terms of different categories of assignments and how they're graded in the same rubric. That said, their IU grade, their university grade, is something that the teacher can't discuss with the students unless they've signed that form. They can discuss their high school grade, but we've tried our best to give teachers the freedom to do their college work as a college instructor would in terms of treating students as college students and grading them as college students, and then allow the high school teachers to work with parents on their high school grade on things that might matter more to high school principals and more to high school teachers. In other words, daily homework and daily participation is sometimes more important to some districts. Some districts really like to see regular testing, and that can be part of a high school grade, but it isn't necessarily part of their university grade.
I just want to add one sort of caveat, I guess a piece of information or advice, particularly for new faculty in institutions of education, whether you're K-12 or high school. If you're dealing with some sensitive issue and you talk to an administrator about that sensitive issue, whether it's your chair or the principal, whoever, always follow up with a written email saying, this is what we discussed, this is what we agreed to. If I am incorrect or I need further clarification, please respond. That way you always have a paper trail. So always create a paper trail when you're in these sort of sensitive sorts of conversations. Just practical advice.
Good advice in many situations, I think. Okay, well, that is a couple more minutes. We're scheduled to go another 15 minutes. We don't have to. But if other people have more questions, please submit them. We still have over 20 participants on the line, as it were. So are there other things that you'd like to hear the panelists address? Oh, here's another one. Shifting the focus from an equity focus to self-interest. Many of us, and I think that's in the colleges and universities, hope an introductory history course will spur student interest in registering for additional classes in our discipline. Mark said he doesn't see much of that happening. Have any of you come across resistance from post-secondary faculty to dual and concurrent enrollment credit programs that affect our bread and butter university classes? The answer to that is yes, but I will let people answer that.
I think it's funny that there's just this assumption. I think that's why we need to have more of these conversations. And I really applaud you, Julia, and the AHA for setting up a continual conversation with high school teachers, or between university professors in the same discipline and high school teachers, because I think this conversation really needs to take place more and more. And I'm really fortunate that my whole position is sort of created to build this bridge, because we really need more bridges. I really wish there were more folks who had that in their job description, because I think if we really care as university faculty about the future of the humanities, I think we need to be doing really deliberate work in building relationships with high school teachers. So yes, I think there's a lot of concern in the university right now that students only really take one course, because so many of them are directed into the sciences, into business, and therefore that one course needs to have that credit for the department, and the department is not getting that credit if they're taking that class in high school. And so I think there are a lot of issues with that reasoning. One is maybe universities need to do more about giving credit to the department when that department is actually sponsoring all that dual enrollment work. In other words, letting if it's about remuneration, if it's literally about money, that if that department is doing that work to build that relationship, that department should get some credit for all of those students, and that enrollment should be counted in their favor, however these numbers are being accounted. I think there's also, I think we need to think about how our dual enrollment students are getting prepared for 200 and 300 level courses more quickly. Therefore, when students come in and begin matriculating, maybe we shouldn't be assuming they're either going to take 100 level course or nothing. Maybe we should be encouraging more freshmen to take 200 and 300 level courses if they have succeeded in a dual enrollment environment in high school. And that we're seeing some of that take place here at my institution. And I saw that at my previous institution as well, that when students love their high school dual enrollment, even if they're not going to major in history, they are more likely to just enroll in a 300 level class in a particular topic of their interest. And that's why these 100 level courses that are done in dual enrollment really need to stress those college success skills and that writing. Right? To me, I talk all the time about writing, because we want that student to succeed when they just take a 300 level course without a 100 level course at the university.
I will say, from my perspective, doing a survey of colleges and universities about enrollments, one of the questions I have asked over the years has been whether or not the department does receive credit for any dual enrollment offerings, and the majority of respondents do for their department. So it's not overwhelming, but it is more than 50% of the people who respond to my survey indicate that their department receives credit for the student enrollments in their dual credit programs. So
I think it's a question though, so you may receive credit for that, but the idea is that how does that impact in the university budget, which is a bigger and more complicated conversation. So you might, be identified as having, say 369 students or something like that, but the budget shows that you have a decline because you don't have quote unquote core students in your classes, you have concurrent students. So that kind of complicates it. a little bit. I wanted to just respond to, and Dan probably, he's heard this too. So it has had an impact. We can't get away from that. It has had an impact. That we have seen declines in enrollments, and it's not just in history, but we can also look at communication, we can look at English, we can look at biology, languages and math in particular. But it doesn't have to have a negative impact. And I think that's the different question. And that's what we've been talking about is really, how do you better integrate and have a better working relationship? How are you thinking about pedagogy? How are you working with your high school partners? Because many universities, they have, there are some that aren't really serving right around in their community, except for maybe a small number because they have a national reputation and they draw students from all over. But most universities, their students are coming from fairly local, and they have feeder high schools. And so that's that opportunity that we have to think about in history and in any other discipline. So I think the other thing I wanted to mention is also our general education requirements, where we had distributed core requirements. Take this class, take that class, take this. And that has also undermined. So what we've seen is some real innovation in general education to really embed the humanities in a different way, rather than saying, take US Survey 1 and 2, or World History Survey 1 and 2, or Western Civ 1 and 2. So the students can still just transfer those credit hours. And they can have them go for their electives or whatever, but they might be taking courses with history faculty who are teaching these really robust general education programs that maybe aren't following that traditional model. So that's another asset that we could kind of build in.
Yeah, I want to echo what Elaine said. The funding question is very complicated, particularly how your funding is in your state. I mean, there's a definite loss of student credit hour revenue, say for UT Austin, that really freaked them out, because that was the money that they used to give professors sabbaticals to do the research. And so that upset a lot of people. But that also increased the funding at South Texas College, on the other hand, right? Because we captured those student credit hours, right? So that pitted, say, Research One versus a community college, and how that money is being distributed, right? And departments, particularly that were used to having 500 students in a survey at UT Austin, and using that money then funneled up to the elite faculty and departments, is now, the well's gone dry, or it's trickled. And so it's complicated, I think, and there are legitimate concerns there. Concerning majors, I had a high school student, I didn't know he was a high school student. He was taking my Texas history class. It was online, and I found out he was a high school student because he was planning to graduate with his associates in history, because he wanted to be a history major. And so what we're trying to do at STC, and we're still trying to roll this out, is, and this has to be the integration between that high school faculty and that college department, that institution of higher ed, is to have the students declare majors early on. And that's where the high school faculty within their department, in this case history, really has to become the frontline person encouraging students to pursue history. That cannot occur if there's a rupture or not enough of an integration between the higher ed department, higher education department, and the local high school faculty, right? If there's this sort of elitism and, wow, you guys are there, you're not as good as us, well, then we're losing potential majors. And that is something we need to overcome to create that pipeline. So dual enrollment can become a very robust pipeline for history majors and other majors as well. But we got to get past some of these barriers I think we have in our own head concerning the academy.
Thank you. Okay, another question about South Texas College. Does your district have competition between STA dual enrollment and on-ramps for UTA? That's South Texas, I think, and University of Texas at Austin?
Yes. So you want to talk about the on-ramps versus STC courses? For those who don't know, on-ramps was a response, in fact, to this loss of revenue that the Department of History was having. But it was also a way for UT to start, I think, being closer to the community for some people. So depending who you're talking to, right? It's either a way of slowing down the loss of revenue for the institution of higher ed, or it's a way of expanding UT's footprint into the community. So I think it's who you're going to talk to in their perspective. But on-ramps is a year-long course to get 3 credits, whereas dual enrollment at STC is a fall semester and a spring semester where you can acquire 6 credits. On-ramps, the student can option out of the course so that they just get high school credit. And the grader is usually a graduate student, although the instructor is a faculty member at UT Austin, but the actual instruction occurring day to day is a high school instructor who may or may not have a master's. So there are, I think, some structural problems with on-ramps compared to what you got to do to be a dual enrollment instructor. To be a dual enrollment instructor by state law in the state of Texas, you have to have a master's. You have to have gone through an interview process with the department. We'll get 14 people interviewed, and we might only accept 1 or 2 into our department, right? So that front-end interviewing process of vetting of faculty for high school employed individuals who could be dual enrollment has to be very robust. So there's some, I think, advantages to taking STC's dual enrollment program. Now, obviously, I have a perspective there, a prejudice there because I'm at that institution. But I think structurally between UT's on-ramps and STC's dual enrollment, I'm just going to be blunt. I don't think they compare. Simply because the in-person instructor at the dual enrollment program is somebody who's gone through the rigors that they could actually teach at UT if they wanted to. Or
one of the issues, I apologize for the background noise. One of the issues, I think the bigger issue here is scale, right? What kind of economies of scale can we look for, and how are those structured, whether they're courses and learning that's taking place on a high school campus or learning that's taking place on a college campus. So online learning has definitely had a lot of early promise about scale, which I think a lot of people who've been teaching online the last year maybe are realizing, hey, wait a second, that might not be quite what we thought it was. And so then other ways of kind of structuring the labor, the academic labor and the student work, so that you're able to achieve some economy while still getting the best learning possible. There are different models for that. Janine?
No, I think I really appreciate the way you frame that. I here at IU, we have, once we hit something like 100 teachers or maybe less than that, we definitely realize that the problem of scale is big, that to run a really good program, it's really hard to have, that many teachers in a really good program, especially in one particular subject. And so I'll talk a little bit about what we've done. We started doing our professional development days regionally at the regional campuses throughout the state. And that way we've been trying to build relationships among teachers within every particular region of the state so that the teachers could rely on one another for resources so that they could share, in a more intimate environment than just having to come into our main campus. And also for the sake of building a relationship between the students in that particular region and the regional campus that's available there. The students are, in our program, the students in each of our regions is actually enrolled in the regional campus that's nearest to them. Because the goal is not just to create a pipeline into the main R1 institution in our state, the flagship, so to speak, but the goal is to really create a pipeline into all of our regional campuses. And that's why all of our regional campuses also participate in our pipeline program for the high school teachers, where faculty across the state participate in teaching in our master's program for high school teachers. Because we're not just trying to build a relationship between all of these teachers and our R1 institution, we're trying to build a relationship between the university, the state's university, and the state students. And we think in terms of, we talk a lot about K-16 public investment in students all the way up through college as a public institution that we serve K-16. And therefore we really want to build opportunities for students who are going to get in, who want to do something, who may or may not qualify for admission into our flagship campus, to still have really excellent access to resources and to college level work from the time that they're in high school.
I think one of the important things to keep in mind too is that accrediting commissions are paying greater and greater attention to concurrent enrollment. So this is something that has changed a lot in the past 10 years. So it's not just NACEP anymore. It's the Higher Learning Commission, it's middle states. So there was a real tension, but I think, and I think that's been very helpful because it has provided guidelines. It has encouraged, because we were just seeing universities and colleges just expanding and expanding and expanding their partnerships. And it was a one-person shop. And as Janine mentioned, you have 100 or more teachers. How is that functional? So again, it's been helpful to have these guidelines and of saying, hey, here's some best practices, or we are paying attention to this. So I think there's a lot of resources now compared to, say, even 6 or 7 years ago.
Thank you. And we're actually technically out of time, but if there are additional questions, I encourage you to email me. We will have the recording available on the AHA's YouTube channel, and that it usually takes around a week, give or take, to turn that around, and it should include the questions as well, and we're hoping to be able to caption it so that it has that accessibility too. For those of you who think your colleagues might be interested in watching the recording, we encourage you to disseminate that link when it's up, and even have these conversations in your departments, your high schools, wherever, and let us know how they go. So the AHA has the standards, guidelines, recommendations for dual and concurrent enrollment programs in history. They were posted to the chat early on in the webinar. I encourage everybody to take a look at that. And we are always welcoming feedback on existing standards. We've revised that one, I think, relatively recently, and it's definitely a landscape that the AHA is interested in, and we've been having these conversations now for 5 or 6 years, so there's no reason to stop now. And thank you all so much for sharing your information and your experience with us.